In this video I'm at Global Birdfair and we've been looking at what goes on at a Global Birdfair. And I'll discuss the claim that some have made that it's just a wildlife travel show. We started off exploring the Linden Nature Reserve on the southern side of Rutland, not far from where the Birdfair is held, and saw a few nice things to start off with, but the wildlife highlight of the weekend was yet to come. Well, we just popped into one of the hides. As we walked in, there was an osprey, a juvenile osprey, perched on the tree, close enough for me to get shots like this, and apparently they rarely land on this dead tree. So for one, that was good. A close-up osprey at Rutland. And if that wasn't good enough, we also saw some otters. Initially, it was just glimpses and the odd tail waving about as they splashed around in the reeds. But as they continued to play fight, they ended up out in the open, and I got some okay footage. The hide was pretty busy, and as you can imagine, the otters caused a bit of a fuss, so I had to deal with quite a bit of camera shake from the vibrations travelling through the wooden floor, but I think it came out okay. On Friday morning, when we headed into Global Birdfair, I started off with watching Graham Leon's talk on pan listing, before joining him for a BioBlitz, where we found over 200 species in an hour, before I then headed off to explore the Birdfair site, which seems like a good time to talk about what there is to see and do. As you enter, there's an information stand to help you find your way, and next to that is 3 large marquees of lecture theatres, where a whole range of talks take place. There's a marquee with an auction where you can bid on some cool stuff, like paintings and books and wildlife tours. And there's a whole load of these large marquees with all sorts of different vendors. There's also this marquee which is entirely full of artists and photographers, and every weekend they always have an artist or artists doing some art creation on the site. Many bird and wildlife art names are here, including the wildlife illustrator Richard Lewington, and wildlife cameraman Simon King was here too. There's a whole mixture of wildlife themed stalls in the 3 main marquees. Conservation bodies like Butterfly Conservation, the Dragonfly Society, and the Pan Species Listing stand is here too. There are a number of booksellers, and there's even a pond on Joe Ashton's stand. And yes, there are wildlife holiday stands, but they are just some among the many others. And there are a few more photography and art stands mixed in here too. There are also 2 long marquees full of optics and photography stalls, where you can try out binoculars, scopes, thermal vision setups, cameras and lenses, and other accessories. Most of the big names are here, and many have their own events and talks too. There's also a bird ringing demonstration where you can see birds being rung, and a young conservation hub too, where young conservationists can give and see talks. There is a discovery zone run by Wild Space, with lots of family events like moth trap openings and displays, and a breakout area with toys and activities for families to chill out in. There's also the Owl Workshop, where you can get advice from photographers and wildlife experts, and most mornings start with a close-up look at last night's moth trap finds, led by moth experts like my friend Ben Rumsby and Nick Baker. And I gave a workshop with Nick Baker on pond life here on the Saturday, which was fun. And there's also the podcast stage, where podcast episodes are recorded live in front of an audience, including the 2 episodes I recorded for the UK Wildlife Podcast. The main Osprey stage hosts the big events and talks, with experts and TV personalities, and a big quiz on Saturday evening. Most evenings, a moth trap will be being run somewhere, and although not an official event, if you ask around, you may be able to tag along with someone. I did with my friend Ben, who was catching moths for his morning talks. Unfortunately, that meant I was a bit busy wandering round and setting up when the Saturday evening party took place, and managed to turn up just as it finished. I also mentioned the glamping tents on site, which, along with the campsite, is one option for convenient on-site accommodation. So what about these claims that Birdfair is just a sales pitch for high-carbon wildlife holidays? Now, I'm not going to go into the pros and cons of ecotourism here, other than to say that saying it's always bad is not really a universal opinion among those in conservation. So let's look at some of the numbers. Well, if we look at the stalls, then around 45% of them are advertising, at least in part, holidays abroad. But some of these, to be fair, are the nature reserves themselves or local tourist boards, rather than just larger international companies. So that leaves over half that are shops selling books, cameras, optical suppliers, conservation bodies, that whole marquee full of art. And of course, the stalls are just part of the event, as we have seen, with all the activities and events and talks going on that I've already mentioned. I think it's fair to say it's a lot more than just a wildlife travel show, and a pretty good value one at that, at only £20 for a day ticket and £50 for all 3 days, and free entry for the under 18s with an adult. It's certainly a lot cheaper than most of the other natural history and photography conferences that I've seen. And one great thing about the Global Bird Fair is that I saw loads of families with children on a Saturday and Sunday. And they were going to talks, events, and talking to experts about the wildlife they are obviously so enthusiastic about. And some of them were giving talks on that Young Conservationist Hub. And some of those children that have now grown up into young adults were giving talks elsewhere. So I think it's fair to argue that the fair is doing its best to encourage the next generation of conservationists too. Personally, I think it's a great event. Perhaps it would be better if it's less reliant on ecotourism, but that's just a fraction of what's going on, and the claims it's just a glorified wildlife travel show are not exactly accurate, at least in my opinion. So, why not come see it for yourself next year and make your own mind up?